with Gnosticism, what you have is the rejection of a moral life, a rejection of virtue, a rejection of just, simple things like the Ten Commandments, because that was given by the evil God, remember. And in Gnosticism, it's anything and everything, right? Because you're enlightened, you're beyond good and evil, right? Which is why, in ways, Sean Martin is correct to cite Nietzsche as influenced by Gnosticism, sure. Because Gnosticism, again, is a flight from reality, a flight from the created order, a flight from meaning, into mental fantasy of you being your own God in your own mind, right? Neo in the Matrix or something, and denying the world. But when Christ became incarnate, when God stepped into history, this is the affirmation of the world. And if God can do that, he can preserve the scriptures from errors, as all the church fathers say. If he can become incarnate, if he can create the world, he can preserve the scriptures from error. Right? Why are you so unbelieving? Where's your faith? So, in the same way, we would have to reject this notion that Gnosticism's salvation is just like, what does it even mean? Like, oh, you learn a fact and that makes you awake? Did you meditate one day and you just saw the right beam of light or something like this, and you don't have to worry with scripture or sacraments or keeping of God's commands or none of that, because it means you're God, is the simplest way to put it, right? It means man is God, and man can determine what right and wrong are, what good and evil is, who God is and isn't. It's all this determination based on a ridiculous appeal to man's pride. Then that's essentially what Satan appealed to in the garden, was the pride of man. He said, basically, you can be God, right? And that's essentially what Gnosticism says, is that you're God, not the God who made you. Now, what we say is that Christ came to make us in his own image. And by that we mean immortal. Right? So the immortality that Christ brings in the resurrection makes us also sons of God by adoption. He, of course, is a natural son of the Father, eternally generated. We are sons by adoption, by grace. In Gnosticism, none of that really makes any sense. You just have this kind of elite group at the top of the secret societies. Really, the secret societies, I guess, is the best way to describe Gnosticism. And you have the anti-material, anti-creation doctrine, dualism doctrine, God versus matter. That's why they can't stomach the idea of an incarnation. And that's why for us the incarnation is so important. It's because really salvation hinges on correct interpretation and belief about the incarnation. That's why all the first centuries of the church's battles with heretics are over the incarnation and God. That's what all 7/8 councils of the first millennium are about. So, and then when you deviate, by the way, on any of those things, you get the mutations and the deformations. Protestantism, Roman Catholicism, etc., etc. So as we said, it's not, what am I trying to say? It's not that Gnosticism is like one group out there. It's more like a kind of generic idea that encompasses a lot of different potential groups or movements that could include things like pantheism or New Age groups, remember, theosophy, these kinds of things, Crowley's group. Cults are in many ways influenced by Gnostic doctrines, whether they know it or not. Something like Scientology, you could say, is Gnostic, with the idea of Thetans are trapped in our bodies or something like this. Mormonism, Jehovah's Witnesses, these are all in many ways quasi-Gnostic. And that's, again, because there's not one Gnosticism. And the same can be said, by the way, of Platonism and Neoplatonism. That some people, who get really into studying these kinds of things are tempted with Platonism. And the appeal of Platonism is that it gives the appearance of a kind of hyper grand order, unified field order of reality, and everything is very mathematical and geometric, which in part is true about the world. I mean, we do seem to see, fundamental reality being formal, being geometric, this kind of stuff in terms of physics, cymatics, platonic solids, that stuff seems to be true. But the highest God of that system can't just be an impersonal mind. There's really no such thing as an impersonal mind. It doesn't really make any sense. And you don't really have a relationship with an impersonal mind, right? So what we see in the scriptures, what we see in Exodus, we see in Exodus 3, I am that I am, that's a statement of God's personal covenantal relationship with his people. Very distinct from the idea of an impersonal force, right? It's not the number 7 that's making a covenant with Israel in Exodus, right? The number 28 is not what is in the burning bush, right? It's not an impersonal force. It's not gravity in the burning bush speaking to Moses. It's the theophany, right? The divine energies manifesting directly face-to-face interaction with Moses, which is personal. Right? All the divine energies of God are hypostatic. They're inhypostatized in our theology, which means that they're personal. And really anything that we know about God is because of how he has personally revealed himself. So there's no impersonal being or thingness to God that we abstract, so to speak. God is not like one of the many things that we put under a microscope or dissect or study. This, of course, is the fault of where scholasticism would go, right? Counting God amongst the array of, quote, things in the world. And God, at the top of this chain of being, has the most thingness, or the least thingness, however you want to put it. Right? That's not what we believe. Right? St. Gregory Palamas argued voraciously against this when he debated with Barlium. And that's precisely why our God is different. It's unique. And it's not the God that Gnosticism, number one, claims that we have falsely. The evil tyrant. Actually, the God of Gnosticism is tyrannical because it's this weird demiurge that you got to escape from, who trapped you in this body. And by the way, how do you know which is the right way to escape? Is it just through moral abandon and doing whatever you want? Or is it through rigorous asceticism? Or is the right way to escape this through ritual magic? I mean, who knows? There's no way to know because there's not one Gnosticism. And by the way, all those are false. None of those things can save you because they're all human-based, self-willed will worship, basically. Right? It's all humans attempting to save themselves and just basically worshiping themselves is all that stuff is. Dead works, as the scripture says. None of those things can save you. Only union with Christ can save you. And that's why he came. So salvation, you see, is the whole man. And that's why Christ assumed the whole man, fully human. Right? He didn't assume human reason just to make us rational, disembodied ghosts or Casper or something. He assumed human nature and all of its faculties, including reason, in order to deify those faculties, raise them out of the state of death and corruption. So, in other words, that shows that the salvation of man is holistic. It's the whole man that's saved, body, soul, nous, right? It's not just the soul or psyche or intellect of man. And that's, of course, the chief anthropological error of Gnosticism, is that it posits the idea that the body is basically worthless and a prison, like Plato said, something to be escaped, denied, or if because it doesn't matter, right? If it's something to be escaped, then it really doesn't matter what you do in it, right? You can commit bestiality. It doesn't matter, right? Total moral abandon. Or your Gnostic cult leader might tell you that you have to completely control your body through some crazy ascetic thing and stand on your balance on your big toe for 8 years on top of a mountain. And unless you do that, you can't be saved. And you can't have a wife either. Right? I mean, you get all these crazy extremes, and neither of those extremes is the way that you're saved, right? I mean, in Orthodox theology, any ascetic practice is not itself the means to save you. Asceticism in our theology, based in Scripture, right, fasting, these kinds of things, this is essentially to aid you in gaining control of the passions. That's really all it does. That's all it can. What else can it do? You don't pay God by fasting, right? There's no Roman Catholic transaction receipt ledger book where you tabulate the hundreds of days of worth of your temporal remission of sins through fasting. And so in the same way, I'm saying, you start to see these two extremes of the ascetic rigor of Gnosticism or the total moral abandon. I mean, both of these are ridiculous, but throughout history, they seem to have a very powerful pull on man precisely because of man's pride. Well, neither of those extremes are conducive to man's salvation, because you're not saved through these efforts, right? And that's the problem, is that all those methods essentially posit, again, self-salvation. And that's really the root of Gnosticism, is self-salvation. And that's why, of course, the New Testament so many times makes reference to these kinds of heresies, right? It's because what does John say in his epistles? That anyone who denies Christ coming in the flesh is of the spirit of Antichrist, right? So it's not talking about the end times person, Antichrist or whatever. John is talking about the spirit of Antichrist, which is essentially, again, the denial of the incarnation of Christ in the flesh. And that's why Gnosticism is, again, the spirit of Antichrist. That's why it's satanic, because it, from the outset, denies the goodness of God and God's creation. Christ becoming incarnate, Christ being born of a woman, is an affirmation of the goodness of creation, right? And that means that man's problem is not his environment. Man's problem is his inner will and desire to go against God. Sin. That's man's problem. A moral problem. It's not a environmental, metaphysical problem that is wrong with man. Pride and sin is what is wrong with man. So the church is thus a spiritual hospital. Anyway,